In the complex game of love, every relationship has its own story. This game feels beautiful when both players are honest, but the moment one cheats, it turns into a battlefield of pain and unanswered questions. My story is no different, teetering between love, trust, and betrayal. My name is Alex, a 35-year-old man who has been married for 8 years. My wife, Jessie, is a 34-year-old woman and my life partner. Our marriage was built on the foundation of love and trust, or at least that's what I believed. Recently, we had been discussing starting a family. I thought our relationship was moving in the right direction, but little did I know that the roots of our bond were beginning to wither. Jessie works as a software sales representative. Her job involves selling accounting software to banks and other corporate clients. Her schedule is demanding, and she frequently travels to meet with clients. Her dedication and success in her career always made me proud. But one day, my world turned upside down. It all started with an unexpected phone call from a woman I didn't know. She introduced herself as a secretary at an office and said she had something important to tell me about my wife. Her voice was shaky, and she sounded nervous. She asked if Jessie was around, and when I told her Jessie was at work, she began to speak. She told me that my wife had grown too close to her boss. She added that she had seen them together on multiple occasions, looking more than just professional colleagues. At first, I laughed it off. I explained that Jessie was in sales, and meeting with clients was just part of her job, but then she said something that shook me to my core. The woman explained that Jessie would often wear her wedding ring when she arrived at the office, but would take it off during meetings. That comment raised a red flag in my mind. I asked her, "Why does that seem strange to you?" She replied, "Because her behavior changes when she's with her boss." After that phone call, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Was it just a misunderstanding? Or was there more to the story? I tried convincing myself it was just gossip, but the questions kept swirling in my mind. For the next few days, I started paying closer attention to her routine. I noticed she was busier than usual and often came home late at night. Whenever I asked, she dismissed it as work pressure. I wanted to believe her, but something inside me wouldn't let it go. One day, I decided to check her phone. I know it was wrong, but at that moment, I didn't see another option. In her messages, I found conversations with her boss that were far from professional. Her boss had written, "Spending time with you today was amazing as always." Jessie had replied, "You make my day so much better." Those messages shattered me. I asked myself, how could I have been so blind? How did I not notice any of this before? I decided I needed to confront her about it. That evening, when she came home, I asked her directly, "Is there something going on between you and your boss?" She laughed and said, "Are you crazy?" "It's just a work friendship." But her words felt like lies. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. I needed answers. That's when I hired a private investigator. It wasn't an easy decision, but I had to know the truth. The investigator followed her routine and uncovered details that shook me to the core. He reported that Jessie often went out for lunch and dinner with her boss. They had even been spotted at a hotel coffee shop. These findings confirmed my worst fears. I decided it was time for a direct confrontation. One evening, I showed her the messages and the investigator's report. I asked her, "What is this? Why did you lie to me?" For a moment, she was silent. Then she admitted, hesitantly, that she had developed an emotional connection with her boss. She insisted that it was nothing physical and that it was limited to conversations. Her admission made me angrier. I asked, "If it's just emotional, why did you hide it from me? Why did you feel the need to lie?" She explained that she had been feeling lonely. She said, "You never had time for me. I would come home exhausted and want to talk to you, but you were always busy." Her words broke me. Was this my fault? Had I failed to meet her emotional needs? We decided to seek couples therapy to address these issues. During our sessions, we discussed the cracks in our relationship. I realized that I had become so engrossed in my work that I had stopped spending quality time with her. She admitted that instead of sharing her feelings with me, she turned to someone else. Therapy gave us the tools to understand each other better. We promised to work on our relationship and make it a priority. Today, we're still rebuilding. It's not easy, but we've learned that love and trust are essential for any relationship. She would usually take it off before entering the building. My mysterious caller noticed my silence and asked if I was okay. I told her to continue, hoping she would provide more information to help me piece everything together. Unfortunately, no such luck. She explained that my wife's boss had regular meetings scheduled with her, sometimes 3 to 4 times a week, and occasionally they would even go out for lunch. On the surface, it sounded like part of winning over an important client, but the detail about the ring still dominated my thoughts. The only reason I could think of for her taking it off was when she was alone with him in his office, and that reason bothered me deeply. I thanked the caller for coming forward and asked if she could tell me who her boss was. Initially, she was hesitant. She said revealing this could make things very difficult for her if anyone found out. I promised her I wouldn't disclose Emily and assured her that I appreciated her actions and would protect her. After a brief pause, she finally told me Alex. Armed with this information, I wanted to confront my wife and find out if it was true, but I couldn't rely on the word of someone I had never met. I decided to bring it up casually and observe her reaction when she got home that evening. When she arrived, she seemed as cheerful as ever. She kissed my cheek, asked about my day, and began talking about hers. I tried my best to stay calm, but the weight of what I knew lingered in the back of my mind. Then she mentioned a new client who was close to finalizing a deal for the software. I let her talk, but when the opportunity arose, I casually asked, "Did Greg help with that?" She froze. Her hands stilled as she was rummaging through her purse. Her face gave away the unease she was trying to hide. I watched as her mind raced, probably trying to recall if she had ever mentioned Greg to me before. "I know everything," I said, breaking the silence. Her demeanor changed instantly. She slumped into a chair, her face pale, and buried her hands in her face. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "I never meant for it to happen." I took a deep breath and asked, "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, but eventually said, "A few months." "And why do you take your ring off?" I asked, my voice colder than I expected. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She hesitated for what felt like forever, likely wondering how I knew about the ring. Finally, she said, It didn't feel right to wear it." Her answer felt incomplete, but I didn't need her to finish. The unspoken words were clear. Hearing her admit it made everything feel more real. She started crying and apologizing repeatedly. "I'll stop seeing him," she pleaded. "I'll quit my job. Whatever it takes to make this right." She kept saying she would do anything to fix it, as if repairing the damage was that simple. 2 days have passed since then. I'm still in our apartment, lying awake while she sleeps soundly beside me. I can't stop thinking about what I should do. 8 years is a long time to throw away, but my anger and pain haven't subsided. It's not just about the physical act. It's the emotional betrayal, the lies, and the fact that she kept it from me. If she's willing to work to rebuild what we once had, it will take much more than just quitting her job or saying she's sorry. Eventually, I decided to confront Greg. I found his profile on LinkedIn and managed to get his contact information. I sent him a message, fabricating an excuse about a business opportunity, and scheduled a meeting. Standing outside his office, I noticed his secretary at her desk. She clearly recognized me and was doing her best to avoid eye contact. She looked nervous, probably worried about being found out. When she finally let me in, I saw Greg's office, decorated with faux leather chairs, framed diplomas, and an assortment of odd, artistic trinkets. His large desk dominated the room, and I couldn't help but wonder what had happened there between him and my wife. Greg stood up to shake my hand, but I ignored it. "I'm Jessie's husband," I said. For a moment, his face faltered before he sat back down. I didn't take a seat. "I know about the meetings, the lunches, everything," I told him. He didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he said, "Jessie's an adult. She made her choices." He went on to explain that my wife had told him she was unhappy in our relationship and was much happier with him. He said they had discussed our marriage in detail, and she had admitted to feeling stuck and unsure if she wanted kids. Hearing those words broke me. I realized then that our relationship was beyond repair. The betrayal was too deep to recover from. When I got home, I told my wife that I was willing to forgive her on one condition. She had to send an email to her office detailing the nature of her relationship with Greg. She looked horrified and confused. She tried to bargain with me, but I stood. Firm, I reminded her that she had said she would do anything to fix this. Eventually, through tears, she agreed. That night, I sat next to her as she drafted the email. I made sure she didn't leave out any details, how long it had been going on, the lunches, the office meetings. I watched her hit send, knowing this might ruin her career. I told her this was the only way we could move forward as a couple, though deep down, I wasn't sure if that was even possible. The next day, she seemed anxious and distant, knowing the fallout from her confession was coming. I had photos taken by a private investigator. I confronted Greg and asked if he had anything to say for himself. Without hesitation, he said, "Jessie is an adult woman who made her own choices." He went on to explain that they had discussed my relationship with her and insisted that she was much happier with him than she ever was with me. He even claimed, "She'll never leave me for you." Greg added that Jessie had told him she felt trapped in our marriage and wasn't sure if she wanted children. What he didn't say outright, but what was obvious, was that she had grown bored of me and was seeking something new. Hearing this completely devastated me. That was the moment I decided our relationship was beyond repair. The betrayal ran so deep that I couldn't see any way to fix it. I didn't say another word to Greg. I just turned and walked out of his office, but the entire time, I was thinking about how I could confront both of them again. When I got home, I told my wife I was willing to forgive her, but only on one condition. She had to send an email to Greg's workplace, detailing the nature of their relationship. She looked utterly terrified and confused. She tried to argue, but I calmly told her I was planning to meet with a lawyer in the morning to file divorce papers. She immediately began to plead with me. She didn't want a divorce, but she also didn't want to humiliate herself and admit to her actions. For the next 30 minutes, she begged me for an alternative solution. I reminded her, "You said you'd do anything to fix this." Eventually, through tears, she agreed. That night, I sat beside her as she drafted the email to her workplace. She detailed the full extent of their relationship, including the office meetings and lunches. I made sure she left nothing out. She showed me the draft several times, and I asked her to add a few more details. Once I was fully satisfied, she sent the email. She wasn't happy about it. I could see the dread in her eyes. She knew this email could very well mean the end of her career. I reassured her, "This is the only way we can move forward as a couple." She nodded reluctantly, but I could tell she was only relieved to have found an easy way out of the mess she had created. The next day, she seemed extremely anxious and distracted. I noticed her glancing at her phone repeatedly, clearly waiting for a call from Greg. She was likely worried that he would retaliate and try to ruin her career in response to the email. The call didn't come until the next day. When Greg finally called, he erupted in anger, insulting her relentlessly over the phone. My wife sobbed as she explained that she was trying to fix her marriage and that this was the only way. I can't explain how much satisfaction that call gave me. Her tears didn't move me one bit. I cared so little for her emotions that I found joy in watching her experience the consequences of her actions. Greg's distress was a fitting result for his smug assurance that she'd never leave him for me. I wanted to snatch the phone from her hand and celebrate, but I knew the job wasn't done yet. There was still more for both of them to endure. Greg told her he'd been suspended during the investigation and promised that he'd make sure she lost her job as well. As she begged him not to, tears streaming down her face, I stood beside her unmoved. When the call ended, she ran to me sobbing about how she'd lose her job. I calmly reminded her that we had both expected this outcome, and now we could finally move forward together. Greg kept his promise. He reported her to her employers, just as she had done to him. Unlike Greg, her investigation was quick and decisive, and she lost her job almost immediately. She was devastated, but once again, I reassured her that this was a necessary step for our relationship to become stronger. She nodded and even agreed with me, though I couldn't tell if she truly believed it or if she was just relieved to escape her mistakes relatively unscathed. For a while after she lost her job, I stayed with Jessie. She became more dependent on me than ever before. I let her think we were working toward reconciliation, telling her we would rebuild our relationship together. In truth, I was watching her try to put herself back together, allowing her to hope, only to crush everything again later. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Greg. About a month after Jessie sent the email, Greg lost his job as well. He didn't reach out to Jessie this time, but I discovered through LinkedIn that he had updated his status to freelance consultant, a polished way of saying he was unemployed. It seemed his reputation had caught up with him. I noticed his connections on LinkedIn dwindling daily. Finding new work in his field was likely proving difficult. As soon as I heard about Greg's dismissal, I made my next move. With Jessie growing more comfortable in our rebuilding phase, I told her I wanted a divorce. At first, she screamed at me, furious and full of anger. She accused me of betrayal, called me names, and threw tantrums, reminding me how she had sacrificed her career for me. I calmly replied, "You sacrificed nothing for me. You destroyed everything on your own." I added that I couldn't respect a career that was built on her dishonesty, especially if she was misusing company time for personal affairs. I expected her anger to last longer, but it quickly shifted to desperate pleading. She begged me not to go through with it, saying she would have nothing left if I left her. I told her that everything she lost was a direct result of her own actions, not mine. She continued begging, promising she'd do anything to save us, but I told her there was nothing left to save. I revealed that I had never truly forgiven her, and that my only goal was to make her feel the pain she had caused me. Her tears and pleas didn't faze me. As I handed her the divorce papers, I repeated the very words Greg had said to me. "She'll never leave me for you." I told her everything Greg had shared, how she claimed to feel trapped in our marriage, how she wasn't ready for children, and how she had sought an escape. The betrayal was so deep that no amount of apologies could repair it. She didn't even try to defend herself anymore. She simply cried and begged as I walked out. The divorce process went surprisingly well for me. Jessie had made good money before losing her job, so I managed to avoid paying alimony. While she kept the apartment, I felt no remorse. After all, she had brought everything upon herself. It was a small blessing in disguise. Paying rent for the place on a single income had already been tough enough. Now that she was unemployed, I wished her luck covering the rent. Finding a new job wasn't going well for her either. Working in sales requires a high level of trust between clients and salespeople, and apparently, people find it hard to trust someone who's been involved in an unprofessional relationship with a client. But the story didn't end there. A few days after the divorce was finalized, I found out that Greg had lost his job too. Shortly after, he started messaging me. At first, the messages were angry rants, accusing me of ruining his life. Over time, though, they got worse. Eventually, he started sending outright threats. Initially, it was a little unsettling, but I was confident he wouldn't actually show up at my house or try to harm me. He was just a bitter man trying to find a way to feel powerful again after losing everything. Still, I wasn't about to take any risks. I responded to him and told him I had forwarded his messages to my lawyer and was working on filing a restraining order. I also mentioned that copies of his messages had been sent to local law enforcement, just in case anything happened to me. His attitude changed almost immediately. He started sending me apologetic messages, begging me to let it go. I replied that while I preferred to remain calm, my lawyer and I were taking his threats very seriously. Shortly after that, he stopped contacting me altogether. In the end, I walked away from the situation feeling relieved and satisfied. Both Jessie and Greg got exactly what they deserved. I refused to feel guilty about any of it. Jessie had betrayed our marriage, and Greg had mocked me, thinking he was untouchable. Both of them learned their lessons, and I took whatever victories I could from such an awful situation. I know I made the right decision. I can understand why anyone would want to see them face the consequences of their actions. Jessie's refusal to take responsibility and Greg's smug attitude, both were deserving of the outcomes they got. Now they've both received what was coming to them. Jessie lost her job, and Greg's reputation was completely tarnished. It was important to ensure they were held accountable for their actions.